Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a deep dive into something that's super important, but often pretty confusing.
Yeah, for sure.
Superannuation claims. Specifically, death and disability claims here in Australia.
Right.
We're using some awesome guides and proposals straight from ASFA.
The Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia.
Exactly. So consider this your cheat sheet to cut through all that jargon and really understand what matters most when it comes to these claims.
Yeah, definitely a good place to start.
Now, before we even get into the how-to stuff,
Okay.
our sources really stress something super important. The human side of all this.
Right.
These are people dealing with loss, maybe even facing a life-altering illness.
Absolutely.
Sensitivity is key here.
It really is. It's not just about processing paperwork.
Right.
It's about supporting people through a really tough time in their lives.
Yeah.
And recognizing that every claimant's situation is different.
So true. So then what about the actual principles behind a good claims process? What should people expect?
Well, first off, speed matters.
Okay.
Claims should be processed quickly and efficiently.
Makes sense.
Then there's minimizing intrusion. Only asking for what's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Actually, in the past, ASIC.
The Australian Securities and Investments Commission.
Right. They've actually taken action against some companies for being too intrusive.
Wow, really?
Yeah, like with surveillance tactics.
I guess nobody wants to feel like they're under a microscope on top of everything else they're going through.
Exactly. Transparency is crucial, too.
Okay.
Claimants should always understand what's happening, why they're being asked for certain information, what to expect next.
So it's about building trust, taking away some of that anxiety.
Exactly.
And then fairness, too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Making sure everyone's treated equally and gets the support they need.
Which brings us to vulnerable claimants.
Right.
And this is where things get really interesting. I was surprised by how many situations might make someone vulnerable. It's not just about physical disabilities.
It's so much broader than that.
Yeah.
Think about it. Age, both young and old.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Then you have those dealing with financial distress, mental health conditions, the impacts of natural disasters, or even family violence.
Right. It's a lot to consider. What really stood out to me was the focus on specific groups like LGBTQIA plus individuals or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander claimants.
Yeah.
What kind of issues are they facing?
Well, for the LGBTQI plus community, it's about ensuring inclusivity and respectful communication.
Okay.
Using the right pronouns, making sure records accurately reflect their gender identity.
Right. Makes sense.
And for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander claimants, it can be tough to provide those standard identification documents.
Yeah, because of historical and systemic issues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It really highlights how a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work.
Definitely. And we can't forget about elder abuse.
Oh, right. A very real concern.
Yeah.
Sensitive handling and maybe even bringing in external support services might be necessary in those cases.
Okay, so let's walk through the actual claims process itself.
Right.
Where does it all begin?
Usually it starts with the claimant reaching out, by phone or email,
Okay.
saying, hey, I need to make a claim.
Right.
Then they'll need to submit a formal claim form, which is where things get more detailed.
And that's when the Superfund steps in to see if they even qualify.
Exactly. They'll check the type of cover the claimant has,
Okay.
and whether the situation meets the conditions for release.
Right.
If everything looks good on their end, the claim usually goes to the insurer for a more in-depth assessment.
So the insurer is the one who really digs into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, they'll be looking at medical records, requesting reports, and maybe even doing independent medical exams.
Are there any common roadblocks in this whole process that people should be aware of?
Oh, for sure. Missing information is a big one.
Okay. Like what?
People might forget to include key documents or details,
Mm-hmm.
which can really slow things down.
Right. Then you have issues when someone switched insurer, especially if their Superfunds changed providers along the way.
Yeah, things can definitely get lost in the shuffle. Inconsistencies in member data can also cause problems.
Like what kinds of inconsistencies?
Maybe your employment details aren't up to date, or there are discrepancies in your personal information.
So it's important to keep your Superfund in the loop about any changes.
Absolutely. And don't forget about those medical assessments.
Oh, right. Didn't ASIC crack down on insurers relying too much on surveillance?
That's right. They found that some companies were overusing it.
Which can be super intrusive.
Yeah. Now, it should only be used as a last resort if there are genuine concerns about fraud.
Okay, so you've jumped through all the hoops, all the info's there, and the claim is being reviewed. What are the main conditions that determine whether someone can actually access their super?
There are two key ones: permanent incapacity and temporary incapacity.
Oh, okay. Can you break those down for us?
Sure. Permanent incapacity often goes with total and permanent disability, or TPD, claims.
Okay.
It basically means that due to ill health, you're unlikely to ever work again.
Oh.
Any job that matches your skills and experience.
So it's not just about not being able to do your old job. It's
Right.
about any job you're qualified for.
Exactly. And this definition comes straight from the superannuation industry supervision regulations.
Okay.
It should be spelled out in your policy documents, too.
So it's a pretty high bar to meet.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, temporary incapacity applies to income protection claims.
Right.
This is when you're temporarily unable to work because of illness or injury,
Okay.
but you're expected to recover and go back to work eventually.
So it's like a safety net to replace your income while you're healing.
Exactly. And the benefit can't be more than what you were making before you became unable to work.
It's to replace your income, not add to it.
Right. What about situations where someone can go back to work part-time while still getting income protection?
Oh, yeah. Good question.
That's where those rules around partial return to work come in.
Okay.
Your benefit will be adjusted to account for any income you're earning from that part-time work.
Got it. So those are the two main conditions. Are there any special cases or exceptions that people should know about?
There are a few. For example, even if you don't have insurance through your super fund, you might still be able to access your super balance under permanent incapacity.
Totally.
Yeah, it wouldn't include that extra payout from insurance, but it's something to keep in mind.
So even if you haven't been paying for insurance, there might be a way to tap into your super if you become permanently disabled.
Exactly.
Interesting. Let's talk about offsets. You mentioned these apply when someone has multiple super funds and income protection policies.
Right offsets kick in when multiple policies could mean someone's getting more money than they were earning before.
Makes sense.
Most policies have a clause limiting your total benefits to a certain percentage of your previous income.
Can you give us an example?
Sure, imagine you're making $75,000 a year and you have two super funds,
Okay.
each with an income protection policy that pays $3,000 per month.
Right.
Without any offset, you'd be getting $6,000 a month,
Yeah.
which is way more than 85% of your pre-disability income.
So the offset would come in to make sure you don't go over that maximum?
Exactly. It's meant to stop people from basically profiting from their disability.
It makes sense. What about extending the waiting period on one policy to avoid these overlaps in the first place?
You can definitely do that in some cases. Imagine you have one income protection policy with a 2-year benefit period,
Okay.
and it's currently paying you benefits.
Mm.
Then you find out you have another policy from an old super fund,
Right.
but it's useless because it's being offset by the first one.
So you're stuck waiting for the first one to run out before you can use the second.
Right. Well, you might be able to extend the waiting period on that second policy.
To match up with the first one.
Exactly. So you're basically putting it on hold until you need it.
That way you have continuous coverage, no gaps.
Clever.
Now let's talk about death benefit distribution. This is sensitive, but super important.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's about making sure your loved ones are taken care of if something happens to you.
And this is where those binding death benefit nominations, or BDBNs, come in, right?
Yes, a BDBN is basically your instruction manual for your super fund, telling them exactly who you want your money to go to.
And it's binding, meaning they have to follow it.
Right. The trustee of your super fund is legally obligated to follow your wishes.
But what if someone doesn't have a BDBN? Or it's not valid for some reason?
Then the trustee has to step in and make a decision based on what they know about your circumstances and your dependents.
I see.
This is why it's so important to have a BDBN and keep it updated.
To avoid any potential headaches down the line.
Exactly. You also mentioned a process called claim staking. What's that all about?
Yeah, can you explain that?
Claim staking happens after a death. It's about notifying anyone who might be eligible for a death benefit,
Okay.
giving them a chance to come forward.
So it's all about transparency and fairness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The trustee will usually send out a notice to all potential beneficiaries outlining how they plan to distribute the benefit.
And if someone disagrees, they can object.
Right. It's like a last call for anyone who thinks they have a right to a piece of the pie.
Now let's talk taxes. How are superannuation benefits taxed?
Well, it depends on your age and how you get the benefit.
Okay.
If you're over 60, superannuation benefits are tax-free.
Nice.
But if you're under 60 and getting your benefit as an income stream, you'll pay tax at your marginal rate.
Just like regular income.
Yes. But with a 15% tax offset, which lowers your overall tax bill.
Okay, that helps. What about lump sum benefits?
Those tax rules are a bit more complicated.
Oh.
The part that's taxed depends on how much of your super came from contributions before tax and after tax.
Lot.
The ATO has a specific table with the different tax rates for each part.
Sounds like something you'd want to talk to a financial advisor about.
Yeah, good idea. It's always best to get professional advice with tricky tax stuff. Before we move on, let's quickly touch on terminal illness claims.
Okay, another sensitive topic, but important to understand.
Definitely. A terminal illness claim usually means getting early access to any death cover or life insurance you have,
Right.
as well as releasing your super balance.
So it's about getting those benefits while you're still alive if you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Exactly. And to make a claim, you'll need medical certification from a doctor confirming your diagnosis and prognosis.
So you need solid medical evidence.
Right. The certification usually says you have less than a certain amount of time to live.
Often 12 or 24 months.
Yeah.
And are these benefits tax-free too?
Yes. Lump sum terminal illness benefits are tax-free no matter how old you are or how your super was accumulated.
Good to know. It's a relief that there's some financial support during such a tough time. We've covered so much already.
We have, from the human side of claims handling to the details of the process and even those trummy tax questions.
We still have more to cover, though. We haven't even touched on those essential skills for effective claims handling or those policy proposals from ASFA.
Right. We'll get into all that next time.
Stay tuned for that.
We've talked a lot about, the ins and outs of superannuation claims.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the people on the front lines. Those actually handling these claims, which can be pretty emotionally charged.
Right.
So what skills do they need to navigate, these sensitive situations?
Well, I feel like empathy would be top of the list.
Absolutely.
We're talking about people going through maybe one of the most difficult times in their lives.
For sure. Our ASFA sources really highlight active listening,
Okay.
truly understanding the claimant's perspective and acknowledging their emotions.
So it's more than just gathering information, right?
Yeah, it's about building rapport and trust.
Which is probably especially important for those tough conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
Like when you have to deliver news, that's not what the claimant wanted to hear.
Right. Those can be really tricky.
Yeah.
What are some tips for handling those conversations sensitively?
Yeah. What can people do?
Well, ASFA suggests things like paraphrasing,
Okay.
repeating back what the claimant said.
To show you're listening.
Right, to show you're really understanding and validating their feelings.
Yes, makes sense. What else?
Simple, verbal affirmations.
I see, or I understand, can go a long way. Just to make them feel heard.
Right. Even if you can't give them the outcome they were hoping for.
Setting clear expectations from the start is important too, right?
For sure.
Like about the process, the timelines, what you can and can't do.
No one likes surprises, especially when they're already stressed.
Okay, let's get real for a second.
Right.
What about when you encounter a claimant who's really high conflict or unreasonably persistent?
Oh, those can be tough.
Yeah. How do you handle those situations?
The key is to stay calm and professional.
Okay.
ASFA recommends de-escalation techniques,
Like?
speaking calmly, evenly, and not getting drawn into arguments.
Right. It's like that saying, never wrestle with a pig.
Haha, I've heard that one.
You both get dirty and the pig likes it.
Exactly. Sometimes you just gotta let them vent without taking it personally.
So true. Sometimes using closed questions can also be helpful in these situations.
Yeah.
Which seems counterintuitive when we're talking about active listening.
Right. Why would you use closed questions when you're trying to get someone to open up?
Exactly.
Well, in these high conflict cases, closed questions can actually help you regain control of the conversation.
Okay.
Instead of open-ended questions that let them ramble, you ask questions with a yes or no answer.
To steer things in a more productive direction.
Exactly.
What about documentation? Does that play a role here?
Huge role. Especially with high conflict claimants.
Okay.
Keep a detailed record of everything,
Every interaction.
all the issues raised, and what you did to address them.
So if they bring up the same thing again and again, you've got proof of how it was handled.
Exactly. Now that we've covered those essential skills, let's look ahead.
Okay.
ASFA's got some interesting policy proposals.
Ooh, I like a good peek into the future. What kind of changes are they talking about?
One that stood out to me is accepting electronically signed death benefit nominations.
Interesting.
Right now, they mostly have to be physically signed and witnessed.
Which seems a bit outdated.
It does. ASA is pushing for changes to those superannuation industry supervision regulations
Okay.
to allow those electronic signatures.
To make it easier for everyone.
Exactly. It would streamline things and bring it into the 21st century.
What else is on their wish list?
Another one involves the ATO.
The Australian Taxation Office?
Right. ASA is proposing they be allowed to give fund details to potential beneficiaries.
So if you know someone's passed away but have no idea what super fund they were with,
Yeah.
You could ask the ATO for that information.
Exactly. It would make it so much easier to track down those lost super accounts.
Especially since people often have multiple super funds throughout their lives.
Exactly. What other proposals caught your eye?
Let me see.
There's one addressing First Nations kinship arrangements.
Okay.
The current definition of dependent in superannuation law is quite narrow.
Right.
It's based on a very traditional Western family structure.
Which doesn't reflect the reality for many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities.
Exactly. So ASIC is proposing the law be changed
Okay.
to let trustees consider those First Nations kinship arrangements when distributing death benefits.
It's about recognizing and respecting those cultural differences.
For sure. And lastly, there's a proposal focused on protecting victims of crime.
Okay, this sounds important. Tell me more.
As it stands, if someone commits a crime, like domestic violence,
Okay.
and they're named as a beneficiary in a death benefit nomination,
Uh-huh.
they might still be entitled to get those benefits.
Even if they were convicted of a crime against the deceased.
Yeah, which just doesn't seem right.
It really doesn't.
It's something ASFA wants to change.
Mm-hmm.
They're proposing expanding the forfeiture rule,
Okay.
which currently stops murderers from inheriting from their victims,
Right.
to include other violent crimes.
So that perpetrators can't benefit financially from their crime.
Exactly. And those are just a few of the key proposals.
It's definitely a space that's constantly changing.
It is. It's important to stay informed.
Absolutely.
It's about empowering yourself so you can navigate this complex system and make sure your wishes are respected.
We've covered a ton today.
We have, from the human side all the way to the future of this stuff.
So, listener, what's the takeaway for you?
Hopefully.
You should have a much clearer picture of how these superannuation claims work now,
Right.
especially those death and disability ones.
Yeah.
We've talked about why those binding death benefit nominations are so important,
Right.
and even flagged some things to watch out for.
To help you avoid potential problems.
You don't have to figure this all out alone, though.
Absolutely not.
Remember those ASFA guides we mentioned?
Yeah.
Those are a goldmine of information.
Great resource.
And a financial advisor can always give you that personalized advice.
For sure.
But we want to leave you with one last thought, something to really ponder.
Oh,
We've talked about how complex superannuation can be,
right. And how that complexity can lead to disputes sometimes.
especially with death benefits.
Yeah, even with a BDBN, things can get messy.
So here's the question for you.
Right.
What can you do to make absolutely sure your wishes are followed?
That's a big one.
And how can we improve the system itself
Right.
to better support those vulnerable folks we talked about?
Those are important questions.
We've seen some potential answers from ASFA,
Like those policy proposals?
but we're curious about your thoughts too.
Yeah, what do you think?
Share your ideas online.
Tag us in your discussions.
Let's keep this conversation going.
It's important.
Because together we can work towards a system that's truly fair and compassionate.
A system that works for everyone.
That's it for today.
Thanks for joining us.
Keep diving deep.